Hi, this is Brett Ingram, award-winning entrepreneur, and today I want to share with you business and life lessons from the NCAA March Madness basketball tournament. So the NCAA March Madness is a really exciting collegiate level tournament for basketball. And there's one on the men's and on the women's side. The men's is generally the one that people associate with it and have followed for a long time, but the women's game has come a long way as well. And their NCAA March Madness has gotten a lot more competitive with a lot more parity and really high level play. In years past, there were one or two really standout teams. They would crush everybody else. So it wasn't that interesting. The men's game always had a lot more parity, but now they both do. So they're both very interesting and they're both very exciting to watch. So basically what you're getting is the top essentially 64 teams in the country for Division I, the highest level collegiate level basketball, all coming together with an opportunity to win one title. And it's one of those, few sports where it's a giant tournament where it's all publicized and we get to see it all. They're starting to see this in the football where they're trying to make a football playoff instead of just doing it by voting. So that way the games are actually played and the winners are actually determined instead of voted on. But the NCAA basketball tournament has sort of been the standard for a lot of years because it's always been a lot of fun. You always have a tremendous amount of upsets and crazy storylines that are going on. And so even though it's subjective in terms of what teams get what seeds, the reality of it is once the ball goes up in the air and is tipped off, anything can happen. And that's what makes it so exciting. And in addition to just the pure enjoyment of it and watching these collegiate level athletes, work their tail off to try to win a title, the other thing about it that makes it so fascinating and exciting is the fact that there are actually parallels. If we look at the game, if we look at the games that play out and the structure of the tournament and the way it all boils down, there are actually some really interesting lessons that we can draw from it for both our personal lives, but also our businesses as well. So, the thing about it is, if we look at the tournament, one of the great things also about the collegiate level game is, these people, despite the fact whether or not they're already expecting to go pro and have careers, at this particular point, they're all just college kids. So none of them are making the gigantic contracts that you see in the NBA or the WNBA or whatever. And so they're all hungry, they're trying to prove themselves, and that makes it even more exciting. So if we want to take a look at it, we can look at basically some really key takeaways that we can apply to our businesses and our lives. The first of those is that being the most talented doesn't always make a winner. This is a really, really interesting, powerful, and important lesson. I was watching a surf documentary, actually, not that long ago about women surfing, and it was the best female surfers on one of the circuits in Hawaii. So I think they were doing like the North Shore, and it was some major tournament, and they actually had a few native Hawaiians in it, which I guess for on the women's side is rare. They don't usually have that many. So they were very excited about the fact that at this home tournament they had all this homegrown talent. And I remember one of the women, she was talking and she said, I'm not the most talented surfer out there, but I worked my tail off. And she said, the thing about it is, talent, right, can get beaten. Like hard work can beat talent when talent doesn't work hard. And I think it's, absolutely a true statement. The fact of the matter is, I knew even in high school and in college some ridiculously talented people in one walk of life or another. And the sports analogy is the easiest. And some of them were hard workers, and so they become really good. Others rely too much on that talent, and the kids that keep working, while they aren't blessed with the same natural abilities, ultimately are able to surpass them in terms of their accomplishments and their production and performance and results because they're willing to put in that work. So sometimes the talent can actually be a curse because if it's something that we rely on and we don't work hard, then it can actually become a problem. So the perfect example of this in the tournament is in the very first round, Oakland was a 14 seed, and they upset the number 3 seed Kentucky with the high-profile coach and the high-profile talent. They always recruit some of the best players in America every single year in order to play for them. Oakland is, more of a local team, and yet they still were able to beat them because ultimately talent wasn't enough. Not to suggest that Kentucky didn't work hard, but the fact of the matter is talent isn't enough in and of itself. If you look at the two rosters, there's no question Kentucky is a more talented roster, yet Oakland was still able to beat them. And so I can guarantee you Oakland wouldn't have beat them if they didn't work hard. So it's not an indictment on Kentucky's work ethic, but rather the fact that talent alone isn't enough, right? Sometimes we can sort of bootstrap our way to get to where we want to be. And I think that that's a really important lesson in business because we may look around us. We may see people with abilities that we don't have. We may see people with all kinds of advantages we don't have. Maybe they have a budget. Maybe they, have come from a wealthy upbringing, so they have an unlimited safety net. They can try stuff and fail, and it doesn't matter. Maybe they have connections. Maybe they have parents who are influential or friends who are connected in the industry or whatever it is. But ultimately, all that matters is what we do with what we've got. We can't waste our time being resentful or upset or pointing at other people and saying, oh, geez, they got it so lucky. It doesn't really matter. All that matters is what we do with, what we've got. And the fact of the matter is, when we succeed despite having no advantages and despite having all that, it's all the more sweeter. And so we need to just focus on what we can do. We need to work hard, and we need to not worry about whether or not we've been blessed with talent. Now, if we happen to be talented as well, we need to take this as a warning sign that, we shouldn't rely on just our talent alone and feel like that's going to be enough. My sons both play youth soccer. And one of the interesting things is there was a boy on my older son's team when we were really young, and he would score 2 or 3 goals every single game. He was faster than all the other kids on the field. He had a wicked left foot, and he could run by guys. He was physical, he was strong, he could shoot. And one of the things that I noticed is he was totally left-footed. So he never developed his right foot. And I noticed that the coaches on the youth team, because we played against them, I noticed the coaches on the youth team didn't really try to develop that too much. They just let him rely on what worked. And the interesting thing is, when you fast forward a few years, this was a kid who was an absolute standout. In a league in a big town with 150 kids in it, he was arguably the best or the second best player as a youth. By the time he hit high school, he didn't even really make varsity till he was a junior, and he didn't even really start or play until he was a senior. So he had a pretty good senior year, but the first 3 years, even in high school, were very mediocre for him, and this kid could have been a standout the whole way, but he relied too much on his speed and the one foot. And once teams figured out how to, force him to go to his right, that was the end of it. He had to relearn how to do it all and train. And so it's an important lesson for all of us to take to make sure that we continue to work hard, focus, and continue to develop at whatever we're doing. Another really valuable lesson from the NCAA tournament is that winning and losing can sometimes come down to 1 or 2 key moments, right? I mean, honestly, we see these games where someone throws up a shot at the buzzer and it goes in, and that's it. Or we see a critical foul or a turnover down the stretch, and ultimately it's a 1-point game, and that makes the difference between winning and losing. Now, in a tournament, the sad thing about that is the loser goes home. So the stakes are absolutely huge. In business and in life, one of the nice things about it is we get more cracks at it. So we may fail in one particular attempt, or something might not work out exactly the way that we wanted to, but the fact of the matter is, if we learn from that and we grow from it, then we can actually, work that to our advantage. I remember years and years ago, and I'm dating myself with this, but Michigan had a team called the Fab Five, and they basically had 5 freshmen that were elite level players. And it was Chris Webber and Juwan Howard and Jalen Rose, and I mean, they were just phenomenal, right? So they go to the NCAA finals, and they're totally like outperforming expectation, and everybody's like glowing. And in the final like moments of the game, when they have an opportunity to win, Chris Webber gets the ball and he calls a timeout, and the team had no timeouts left. So they ended up getting a technical foul, and the other team ended up shooting the free throws and winning the game. And so obviously Weber felt terrible. The media came down hard on them and on the coach. Like, is it the coach's fault? Like, the coach should have told them, like, in that last timeout, like, we don't have any timeouts left, so everybody don't call timeout. And he was really hard on himself. He was devastated for losing. But I give the guy a tremendous amount of credit, because what he did was, instead of running from that, he stared it down and he said, look, this is a mistake that I made. And, the guy had nothing to be ashamed of. I mean, he had a tremendous season, tremendous career, and he's one of the main reasons they were there in the first place. But I can understand why you'd then feel responsible. But he ended up starting a charity called Time Out, and he sort of made it into a positive, even though it was something that for him was such a negative feeling and emotion. So I give him a tremendous amount of credit, because I think that takes a lot of character to be able to stare something like that in the face, and instead of pretending it didn't happen or wanting to forget it, he leaned into it and said, you know what, I'm going to learn from this, I'm going to grow from this, I'm going to make something good from it. And that's a lesson we can all learn. But the fact of the matter is, in business and life, we get more than one or two chances. So that's what's amazing about it. But it does sometimes come down to one or two key moments. So we want to be conscious of that, but we also want to recognize the fact that if we learn from what happens in those moments, we can grow from that regardless of what the actual outcome is. Another really key lesson is to be ready to make the most of every opportunity. Sports is the greatest teacher of this lesson over and over and over again than we could ever find, because you can go back through the annals of history in every major sport, and you can find situations where somebody who was either given every opportunity and didn't take advantage of it, so their career was cut short, but you could also find every one of those people who had just a tiny little window of hope that they were ever going to even see the starting lineup or see the ice or the field or the court or whatever you want to call it, right? And made the most of it. Once they got their chance, they never looked back. The most famous recent example, of course, is Tom Brady with the Patriots. He went out on the field. Drew Bledsoe was the starter. He got hurt. Brady went out, and no one knew this at the time. He was basically almost undrafted. He was drafted in the very last round of the draft. No one expected much of him except himself. But he had in his own mind the belief that once I get on the field, I'm never giving the job back. And so nobody else knew that but him. But he went out there, and to his credit, performed really, really well. And Drew Bledsoe, also a super stand-up, very classy guy, handled it with tremendous dignity and grace. But the fact of the matter is, it's a tough situation if you're Bledsoe, and it shows the power of making the most of an opportunity if you're Brady, because he went on to become the best quarterback in the history of the NFL. And who would have ever thought that? In the NCAA tournament this year, Jack Golke, right, went out and shot and scored 10 three-pointers in a single game. 10 three-pointers. I mean, that's unheard of. It almost never happens. I'm not sure even what the record is now. I don't know if 10 is quite the record anymore. It used to be 8. It's probably not even 10. It's probably more than that now, based on the level that people have performed at. But the fact of the matter is, regardless, here's a guy that nobody in America knew his name except for his local fan base at the team that he played for. He wasn't, the McDonald's All-American going to Duke or going to UConn or, any of these other schools, right? And yet he goes out, shoots 10 three-pointers, and now everybody knows his name because he made the most of the opportunity. He carried his team. They won the game, and he had his moment in the spotlight. So despite the fact of, they probably won't go on and win the whole thing, the fact of the matter is he made his mark. He made the most of that opportunity, and that's a memory he'll have for the rest of his life, and it's something that will always stick with him. The other really famous basketball story that I can think of regarding this is Tate George for the UConn Huskies. UConn was down to Clemson in the final seconds, and this is before all their championship runs. So now everyone knows they're a blue chip program. But growing up in Connecticut, I was very familiar with the Yukon Huskies. I loved watching them play, and I always wanted them to win. I thought Jim Calhoun was a great coach. They started to recruit better and better players, and he brought that program from obscurity to prominence. But before they ever won, one of the critical games that they played, they were down. They had the ball inbounding on their own end with like zero point 0.6 seconds left or something on the clock, and they were down by a point. The game looked like it was over. And Scotty Burrell, who was also the quarterback of the football team, threw a pass full court. Tate George catches it, spins, shoots, and drains it at the buzzer. And they ended up winning the game, going on. And because of that one shot, Tate George was a very good player. He was not an elite player. But because of that one shot, really, he actually had an NBA career. He was drafted by an NBA team, went off and played with them. Didn't last very long, but he made the most of that opportunity and went from, hey, this guy's a good college basketball player, to getting a crack at the pros. And it didn't work out, but so what? He's got a great story to tell. He made the most of that opportunity, and it was amazing. And by the way, hats off to Scotty Burrell, because without that perfect pass, that whole play never happens. So it took them both to do it. Another vital lesson from the NCAA tournament is that it takes consistency to be a champion. This is actually maybe my favorite lesson of the whole thing, because people see one standout performance, they see one great thing, but no matter how good you are, and no matter how many times you dominate another team, I've never been a big fan of Duke. They were always sort of the nemesis of UConn, and growing up a UConn fan, I never liked Duke. But one of the things that I always used to think about was when they would drub these teams by 20 and 30 points in every game, I said, we'll see what they're made of when they actually have a tough team and a challenge. Because it's easy to blow a team out by 30. If you're winning by a lot, it's easy to keep piling it on. What's hard is when you are the favorite to win, it comes down to crunch time and now you're trailing or the game is on the line. It's hard not to choke in that situation. And sure enough, they had some moments where they choked away big games because they just weren't accustomed to it. They were so used to being so good for so long. And so it's not about how we operate in our moment of glory at the top. It's whether or not we can be consistent through good times and bad. Everybody can be motivated. Everybody can work hard. Everybody can produce when production is easy and results are coming easily. The question is, are we able to keep going and grind out the ugly wins that we need? Are we able to pick ourselves up when we get knocked down and keep going? Because ultimately, to be a champion, if you want to win all those games that's required to win an NCAA title, you can't be great one day. You can't be great 2 days. You have to be great for every one of those games to win them all, to stand and hold the trophy at the end. Because none of your opponents are going to lay down for you. None of them are going to say, you know what, you take the trophy, we don't really want it. They all want to win. And so if you want it, you have to go and take it. And that's going to take consistency. It takes more than occasional greatness. It takes the consistent performance over and over and over again. And in business and in life, nothing could be more true. You want to build big muscles? It is not about going to the gym once and hitting it hard, and flexing about how much you bench. It's about going there day in and day out when it's raining out, when you don't feel good, when you have a pulled muscle in your back, when you didn't get enough sleep. You still go to the gym. When you run a business, it's about working hard, even though your launch flopped, even though the sales are down, even though the economy sucks, whatever it is, it doesn't matter. What matters is that we have to keep going, keep pushing, and make sure that we get to where we want to be. Another really important lesson is that leaders sometimes need to step up and carry the team in order to be successful, right? So everything is a team effort, and we all know that. But there are moments where the team looks around and wonders, we're struggling, it's just not working, what do we do? And in those moments, it's when the leader needs to step up, take it over and say, I got this, we're good. We're going to win this as a team. It's on me right now, and I'm going to take this. And Jamal Sheed for Houston did that very thing in the game where they were the favorite, but they were struggling. I think the game went to overtime. It was coming down to the final second. and he took the game over, single-handedly started scoring all the points and said, no, we're going to win this game and we're going to move on. And when a leader steps up and carries the team like that, it instills confidence in everybody else. So then when the leader has a bad day, other guys are going to step up too, because you build that belief system inside the team. And when we have a business, it's exactly the same thing. We need to be the person who can step to the front when times are tough, stand up in front of everybody, look them in the eye, and tell them we're going to make this go. At the same time, it's okay if we have an off day sometimes for someone else on our team to pick us up as well. But the fact of the matter is, when the chips are down, we need to be the one to be able to step up and say, I got you, we're going to make this work. And then the last lesson is that overcoming adversity is a requirement for success. I don't care what team you are, I don't care how good you are, there are injuries, there are bad calls, there's bad refereeing, there's atmospheric issues, right? People don't feel good, whatever. We have to be able to overcome that adversity if we're going to be successful. And in business and life, it's no different. We're going to have problems, we're going to have struggles, we're going to have challenges. And we've got to just be able to keep going and know that everybody deals with this, and the winners keep going and don't let that knock them out of the game. So if we are able to overcome adversity, the other beautiful, brilliant thing about that is that not only do we then become successful, but it actually makes us stronger. The old adage, if it doesn't kill you, it makes you stronger, is very true about adversity in business and life. When we're able to come through things and keep going, what ends up happening is we strengthen our own resolve, we become even more resilient, and we become even more bulletproof to be able to keep going through good times and bad. You know, there are more lessons we could draw from it too, but the fact of the matter is those are some of the big ones, and they have real application to our businesses and our lives. So the takeaway here is that the NCAA tournament is a lot of fun to watch, regardless of the outcome of the games. It can be heartbreaking, it can be, inspiring, but it also has within it some really valuable lessons. And when we watch the men and women compete, we invariably discover standout performances, struggles and triumphs, and games for the ages that will be talked about for years to come. These storylines make the whole journey fun and meaningful. And if we also take some lessons and apply them to ourselves and our businesses, then we can not only be entertained, but also benefit and grow from it too.